Greed. A word we often associate with large corporations clambering to make as much money as possible and to forever make the line go up. Wizards of the Coast and its father or parent company Hasbro is definitely one of those corporations. We all associate greed with some of the practices that Wizards of the Coast have done in recent time. Whether that be 4 individual proxy boosters for $1,000 or mechanically unique cards within intellectual properties separate to Magic Secret Lairs that are limited time released to inspire FOMO. The list could go on and on and on for relatively anti-consumer practices that are obviously aimed at making as much money as possible with little regard to the end user. And whilst I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Wizards of the Coast aren't greedy, that I do actually agree with that statement that often there is a greed element to the financial decisions that are made, I did want to unpack it and analyze it a little bit, or at least discuss some of my thoughts about it. This was inspired by 2 things. The first of which was this Blogger post where someone said to Mark Rosewater, one of the lead designers of Magic the Gathering, why should we believe anything they say? Because when they originally said that Universes Beyond was coming, they said that we wouldn't have to engage with it if you didn't want to. And then of course, Universes Beyond, if you didn't know, is now 50% of standard. And the point is that this person is making is that what are you and the company doing to stay honest to your customer base, and why should we believe you? They say, and I quote, "The greed has changed you and Wizards, and it's sad to see." A comment on my video about whether or not Arena cheats you, which, by the way, that video got a lot of angry comments because I basically said that I don't believe the client is cheating you. It's not going out of its way to make you lose specifically. It doesn't even make sense because it'd make both sides lose and thus no one wins. But anyway, this comment, why wouldn't the client be out to get you? Because it was programmed that way. Nothing about this game has been player friendly from the beginning. No dusting, trading, wildcard system, laughable rewards, etc, etc, etc. Yes, again, very anti-consumer practices in terms of how they monetized Arena. I agree with you. I'm pretty much the only content creator who consistently talks about that on their channel. Most people either ignore it, don't engage with it, or pretend it's not there. But the point is, yes, they will do things that will explicitly make money by making monetization predatory. But making the game screw over how it shuffles or provides you cards so you have a bad player experience, that doesn't make sense. What I'm getting at here is that some of the decisions that Wizards of the Coast make, whether it be the Arena team on how they deal with Arena, or the Magic the Gathering Online team and how they deal with Magic the Gathering Online, or Mark Rosewater or Gavin or anyone at Wizards, a lot of those decisions aren't exclusively or even at all fueled by greed or money. What I mean is that in order to increase the player base and increase the user base of something like Arena as a microcosm example of this, you want people to have a good player experience. It is in Wizards of the Coast's best interest to make you have fun games that you enjoy and continue to play. To really label the definition, it is good game design to make a game that feels good to play that you stick around and play more of. The byproduct of that is more sales, but it's not an inherently greedy thing. It is a self-serving element of game design. No one makes a game that is shit that no one wants to play. That is not the end goal of game design ever. If anything, the greedy, and we're going to unpack that in a moment, but the greedy line is to try and get the player to enjoy themselves more so they stick around, they are opponents for the players that are spending money, or heaven forbid, they begin to spend money. The line goes up option in the case of Arena or any digital client is to make the players happy and have fun, not to screw their draws consistently so that you lose. And thus, I'm going to say it again, Arena isn't cheating you. You're just shit, or you haven't self-reflected on why you lost to improve. Sometimes your losses are because of you, not because of a shuffler. And the shuffler fucking you wouldn't make Wizards' line go up. They're not doing that. So the argument doesn't make sense if everything is fueled by money. And also, not everything is fueled by money. I'm going to unpack that now. But on the topic of money, if you want to buy Magic the Gathering cards, you can from CoolStuffInc.com in North America, and you can use the code KENOBI at checkout to get 5% off your order, and it helps to support the show. And in Europe, you can use the code KENOBI-APR while still in April to get money off your orders on magicmadhouse.co.uk. Although we're going into May now, so KENOBI-May to get 5% off your order of all non-pre-sale, pre-order, and non-sale items. So first of all, what is greed? If this was a video essay on YouTube, I should have led with some sort of dictionary definition, right? But here it is: intense and selfish desire for something, especially wealth, power, or food. I think greed is primarily a very human condition and or criticism, right? It is a thing that we level at one another. It is a sin within the Bible, one of the 7 deadly sins, and or is it gluttony is, and greed is a version of gluttony. Either way, it's a sin. And what we do when we describe other things as greedy is we are humanizing them. We're making them into people or entities that have emotions and feelings and motives that align with our own. But truth be told, a corporation or a company is not a person and thus can't be greedy in the same way. It can't just be wanting to gobble everything up for its own sake due to a lust for food or power. Instead, corporations, especially publicly owned and traded ones like Hasbro / Wizards of the Coast, they've got a different motive. It's not a personal motive as such. It is for the profit of the shareholders, the people getting dividends. During the edit, I realized this is kind of a bullshit point, but I want to leave it in and extrapolate a bit further because I say that like it's more understandable when corporations are greedy because we know their like literal output, their key performance indicators, like what they want and things. But I guess really for a person and for a company, they're both existential. Like greed is almost like the exaggeration of survival instincts, where you accumulate things you need, resources, wealth, food, power. And you accumulate too much of it because you're over accumulating, just in case. It's kind of like a broken survival instinct. And in some ways, that's just like the default mode of capitalist companies, is that they want to accumulate as much as possible, not just enough to survive and continue and give out some sort of profit share, but they want to achieve as much as possible. So I guess it's kind of the same thing. It's sort of the existential thing is that like you are trying to survive within a system where you need capital and money. It's pretty much the same. And thus, the actions of a corporation are toward that end. They're actually a motivation that we can understand a bit better than, say, the greed of an individual who wants all the power. There is a very functional end goal of giving more money to the people who are currently bankrolling your endeavors. Is it bad to want to make money? Well, again, on a personal level, I don't think so. I think the average human being, even the most anti-capitalist, socialist sort of person, would be absolutely fine with saying, get that bag, get that bread, make your money to an individual who is doing it through their own labor. I see it all the time when people don't feel bad about the sponsors that I take on the channel, even though they don't personally agree with the product itself. They're happy for me to make some money because people need to make money in this system. That's how it works. Where people start to take issue with making money is twofold, really. Or I guess they kind of come into one. It's when it abuses another, when it puts another in harm's way, or abuses the labor of another. And that's why corporations are criticized more heavily than individuals for getting that bag, because a corporation that is beholden to its shareholders often has higher up company members who are making massive salaries that are pretty much bigger than any human being really ever needs. Those companies are doing that off the back of other people's labor. Yes, I'm basically doing Socialist Theory 101, or softly putting it into the people who are going to turn off at the idea or the concept or the mention of the word socialist. There's this point that I sometimes make when it comes to talking about socialism or communism, where you don't use those words when talking to Americans, because it absolutely is just fucking kryptonite to you people, because you've absolutely been poisoned by the propaganda of McCarthyism for the last fucking, I don't know what, almost a decade at this point. But either way, there are people who are less likely to be accepting of companies trying to make the money because it's at the expense of those doing the labor. Also, it's hard to really care for a corporation because, again, their motivations are profit margins more so than any sort of like positive element towards society or culture or community. So how does that work for Wizards of the Coast is more important, right? I guess the idea that they're making profit over community is more so how they do choices or things that are not for the player base. So, for example, a large portion of the existing Magic the Gathering player base were not happy when Wizards of the Coast started making en masse many sets of different intellectual properties that were not Magic the Gathering. Instead of getting Gerard and Chandra and Nissa and Planeswalkers, the Gatewatch, Nicobolas, we instead got Rick Grimes, Pickle Rick. We actually haven't had Pickle Rick yet. I don't know why I keep saying that. Chun-Li, SpongeBob SquarePants, and the fucking Bang Bus from Fortnite. And the community did not like that because it felt like an erasure of a legacy of something that we've bought into in the past. In some ways, we are stakeholders in the product or the IP because we've been lifelong fans of this thing that you're now like eroding through not taking it too seriously by being nonchalant about what it is that makes magic magic. That in itself is a huge debate around whether or not Universes Beyond is truly damaging to Magic, and the debate is ongoing and the actual proof is not really here yet. that. Those that are going to say, well, actually, you know, the game has grown beyond anything it's been in the past, and Final Fantasy is sold beyond anything that's sold in the past. Those aren't the final outcomes. I did a video on this last week on Friday, which talked about how is Final Fantasy really something they can replicate? Can they get other IPs that can just expand upon and grow and sell better than Final Fantasy? And the argument I was making was that there's only like half a dozen other IPs that can do that, and some of those are probably not accessible. Your Pokemons, your Legends of Zeldas and similar. And thus we are actually in a very difficult point in time where it's all predictions and discussions. At the moment it looks very good. It's what Mark Rosewater keeps saying in response to being told that he's not trustworthy and that greed has changed him. In the blog he explains that Universes Beyond sells better than anything else, and thus shows to be more popular with players than anything else. And that's where it becomes difficult about the greed angle. Is it greed because it's selling really, really well? Or is it actually for the long-term benefit of the game surviving and having a player base that we're expanding the player base through these products? Well, there's also an offset there that I want to throw into. I'm not even giving you concrete answers here, I'm just throwing out some hypotheticals, right? But here's another hypothetical. There is a community positive there that is not motivated purely by money. In some ways, it's a byproduct of the fact that selling more stuff increases the size of the game's player base. However, on one hand, sometimes it doesn't increase the player base. We have this problem with scalpers and collectors when we come to Final Fantasy, where we might see the product just not available for the players. I'll be covering this come June, but I've got a strong feeling that a lot of areas, especially in the UK at the moment, won't have any product available. Allocations are a little bit fucked, and thus people who want to play at pre-release or in standard or with the cards generally drafting Final Fantasy might struggle, and thus the game becomes less of a game and more of an investment portfolio for collectors. And beyond that, there's this conversation around, does Universes Beyond bring in players who stick around? We get inflated player numbers from their marketing surveys that they don't quite fully share with us. And obviously the sales numbers paint this picture of massive sales, but do these players stick around to buy the next set? My point is do the Final Fantasy fans want to buy Avatar: The Last Airbender? Yes, some portion will, because fucking nerds, the Venn diagrams, all different nerd spaces all cross over, but how many? And how many of them are into Final Fantasy and Magic because they're adjacent, but when The Last Airbender shows up, or Guy Fieri's Kitchen Nightmares next year, that doesn't appeal to them and they fall right back out of Magic because we fucked the aesthetic through the use of random IPs. And thus we come back to that point that the Universes Beyond project, it's not really clear whether it's done a positive for the community and the player base. Many people will argue at its current point in time, it's done nothing but damage the legacy of Magic, if you will. I don't know if I agree with that statement, but it's certainly up for debate. But what's the original motivation for moving into Universes Beyond? Is it solely to make money? I don't think it is. Right, hear me out on this one. So, Universes Beyond is the application of other skins to Magic the Gathering, right? And that allows them to explore other worlds, environments, like universes, intellectual properties, through the mode and the medium of Magic the Gathering. The toolbox is that is the Magic the Gathering rule set, and I think they did a damn good fucking job of it with things like Warhammer, Doctor Who, Fallout. What else do we have recently? Lord of the Rings. What a sick limited environment that actually ended up being. Some of the stuff looked clunky from the outside, but when you play it, it's very, very good. And of course, the primary goal that we're all aware of and talk about a lot is what I've already touched upon, that growing of the player base. Is that for money or long-term positivity for the game? Will that even equate to long-term growth, or is it a short-term burst that will shrink? All these things are up in the air. But the point I'm getting to, meandering to, fucking taking a while to get to, if I'm honest, is that I think the designers of current Magic, the people at Wizards of the Coast that are tasked with designing these things, were quite keen to jump onto this project when it came around. Now, I'm not talking from anything that someone secretly told me behind the scenes, but what I'm saying is that game designers, or fans of Magic at least, have been making custom Magic cards since day one. Since 1993, 1994, Inquest magazine and similar, with custom Magic cards showing up on the pages as people submit them or make them up in the team that were making Inquest to make up Lord of the Rings cards and similar. Applying Magic the Gathering's rule system to other things has been an exercise since day dot. And a lot of the fans that were doing that earlier on, even if they're not doing it publicly online on forums and similar, some of those fans have gone on to become members of staff at Wizards of the Coast and become designers for the game. People like to imagine their favorite shit in Magic, because Magic is kind of cool and flexible like that. It allows you to explore things in a mechanical way in a tabletop game that is fun and interesting and modular and connect with one thing, or you can play it separately. Magic's pretty fucking good, am I right? So the project of moving Magic to this place where we can explore other things with it comes from a game design perspective. And that's put a pin in that for a second. That's a point I do want to expand on. The people at Wizards of the Coast, the vast majority of them, aren't there to make number line go up. That is a thing for more Hasbro itself, Papa Hasbro, and more the upper echelons of Wizards of the Coast staff, which some of you might argue Gavin and Mark, for example, are. But the point I'm getting to here is that these people are game designers primarily. Wizards of the Coast pays quite well within the tabletop sphere, I believe, but it's pay dwarves in comparison to digital games like, for example, Riot. So when the pay is lower, why would these people not be trying to move to other digital areas, for example? Why would you take a job at Wizards of the Coast in the first place? Well, a lot of them is because they fucking love Magic. But they really love Magic, and they want to design and make Magic the best it can be. I have never ever spoken to directly or seen a stream of a member of staff from Wizards of the Coast talking about the design of a new product, the word product's kind of dirty there, but a new set, right? A new thing you can play in Magic. Set's a good word. So that be Commander products or draft products. I've never seen them talk about it and think, nah, they're bullshitting. They're doing this for the money. They're doing it because they love what they're doing. They're doing it because they want to engage with an audience and with other players by creating a design space, a game itself that sparks the imagination and is fun for the end user. Now, does some of the choices that they make get marred, get shifted, get twisted by a corporation whose primary thing, to go back to the beginning of the video, is the shareholder and the profit dividend to said shareholder? Of course they fucking do. I guess an example of this may be, like, something I was thinking about was the hat set phenomenon, right? Where we've been less and less keen to use the Magic intellectual property, and is that because of an organic sort of like design philosophy coming from a load of creative and intelligent game design staff at Wizards of the Coast? Or is it more of a top-down, trickle-down thing of like, Universes Beyond is successful and thus we don't have faith in our own brand, so please use less of our own brand and more stuff that looks like other shit, please? It's a question that we'll never have truly answered because no one at Wizards of the Coast is going to say that's true whilst they work there. And thus we come back to the Universes Beyond thing. I think these game designers love that idea. Given the opportunity and the ability to engage with an opportunity they love, Warhammer is a great example of it. A Baldur's Gate was done incredibly well too about Baldur's Gate. Like things that people have a love and a history and a passion for, we get great product out of. We get great cards, great game design, great sets, great environments to play in. But again, those pressures from on high, the trickle-down bullshit does exist. So, for instance, the decision to make half of standard, 50% of standard Universes Beyond, that doesn't come from a game design perspective. That's finding space in the release calendar to fit your Universes Beyond stuff. There is perhaps an argument that like getting the newer players who are coming in for Final Fantasy or Avatar to get into standard, that in some way serves for the greater purpose for the ecosystem that is Magic the Gathering. But I can't help but think it's more just to sell more product. There we go. A motivation that is based upon sales figures and money more so than a desire to create a cohesive or strong game. The word cash grab is thrown around a lot. Cash grab goes hand in hand with greed. Everything Wizards of the Coast ever does is referred to as a cash grab by someone somewhere on social media. But the most common sort of statement that I find kind of frustrating to read, because half the time I'm just like, how is this a cash grab? Yes, it's going to make them money, but like the 140k decks are a cash grab. No, they're aimed at making money, but are also a great and fun, cool thing. Like, how is it a cash grab? But some things that Wizards do are cash grabs. So, for example, pushing Universes Beyond to be 50% of standard. Beyond that argument of it improving the ecosystem for allowing players to get these cards and play them in standard, there's no other reason for it. If anything, it's damaging to standard to make it so big and complicated, to make it more expensive with more expensive product, for example, the heightened cost of Universes Beyond, for then the allocations to be low and the product to be difficult to get hold of because of scalpers and collectors, making standard basically unplayable in paper, which is something I think might end up coming as the price on cards from Final Fantasy will balloon from the lack of availability. Making Universes Beyond 50% of all Magic, that feels like a cash grab. Basically, I guess the way we can summarize the stuff I'm getting at here is that when you see Wizards of the Coast do something, stop and think, like, is someone or is a group of designers within the company sat down in a room doing like brainstorming and development meetings, and they came to a conclusion that resulted in this action? So for example, a load of game developers at Wizards of the Coast were sat down thinking, yeah, standard should be 50% other things that aren't Magic, and Spider-Man should definitely come to paper but not be available in digital. If the answer to that question is no, you don't believe that was the result of a design meeting, then yes, it is a primarily fueled by greed decision. Primarily fueled by line go up. If you think that it was a design decision come to by designers and developers working together that didn't have the input from outside those walls, and they're doing it primarily to build a new fun gameplay environment or to further expand the envelope of what Magic can be, then no, it's not a greedy or financially minded or fueled motivated action. And the important thing to remember is that not every decision that's made in the camp B, where it's designers designing stuff, not every decision there is going to end up being successful. So for example, designers are sort of around and they're talking about how, like, in the zeitgeist, there's this memetic thing of make the cowboy set. We want Cowboy Jace. What a lot of you don't realize, or some of you may not realize, before Outlaw Junction was that there was an ongoing sort of like jokey desire, semi-serious, for us to do cowboys. People wanted a cowboy set. It wasn't outside the realms of possibility because Magic has done flavor of the week stuff in the past. Hit my mic there. And thus they could have organically, without the input of focused test groups and marketing departments that care about, pushing sales numbers and revenue numbers, they could have organically come to that decision. And maybe Outlaw Junction ended up being what it was, which in my opinion was a weak feeling set in terms of the movement of what Magic is. I did not like Outlaw Junction at all. And that's okay. Like, some things don't succeed, some things fail. And also there's a subjectivity element too. Some people probably very much enjoyed the gameplay elements of Thunder Junction, or even enjoyed the very like bubblegum colored aesthetic and sort of what I would call shallow, but other people might call like comical and less serious. So what we can do, please, as we go on, is not call everything Wizards of the Coast do a greedy or a cash grab, because some things are just for the design of it, for the sake of it. And I genuinely believe that Universes Beyond as a project, as a development of the game itself, could have existed from the design meeting scenario over just the cash, money, revenue side of things. Of course, the reality is it's a combination of both, and fueled a lot by the cash, money, revenue of things, because we live in a capitalist society where companies need to make money for their shareholders, and thus that drives things far more than anything else does. So that's my thoughts today on whether or not Wizards of the Coast are greedy. Absolutely. They fucking are a lot of the time. There's so many product decisions that feel greedy, but not everything is greed. Like the shuffler situation, for example, to go back to that original point, the arena shuffler is not a greed, there's like fucking motivated thing. A, it's not doing a thing, it's not trying to fuck you, and B, let's say hypothetically it was, why would that be greed? It makes no sense. But the monetization, the wildcard system, the lack of dusting, the way the economy is on Arena, absolutely fueled by greed. No room of game designers sat down and thought this is a great idea for furthering Magic as a game. That's all I got today. I hope you found this rambling sort of thoughts about greed and game design and how they have a symbiotic relationship in many ways. I hope you found it at least mildly interesting. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I might do a follow-up video to this, which I've read some comments and some more thoughts on it, because it's not an ended thing, right? I even said at one point it's up for debate about something and didn't take a stance. Or did I? Well, it's obvious what my stance is, right? I think Universes Beyond is really fun and great, and I really like it. I look forward to some of you calling me a shill in the comments, and I'll see you tomorrow. Ta-ta for now.